Hello, Sat Shri Akal ji.
ਸਤਿ ਸ਼੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਜੀ ਠੀਕ
How
ਠਾਕ
are you? Yes, thank you. And you?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you.
All
Yes,
right.
thank you for taking time on a Sunday afternoon to have a
I
discussion.
know you have been contacting me for a while, but then
I'm
finally,
glad you've made the time eventually. So
well,
so um so today's theme is about the 17 United Nations Sustainable Goals. So I thought maybe since I haven't had a conversation with you previously, maybe like see how those goals relate to the work that you do, and what you think are the priorities in terms of the sustainability issues.
mhm.
Maybe we could start with that.
Hmm. Well, I did indicate in my response to you that we are already working on these goals, and there are a few projects that we are working on. Um, in fact, we started these projects or thinking about these projects in 2016, and they got delayed in between because of the pandemic and so on and so forth. But we have managed to do a pilot of our solutions and things like that in various countries. Um, so basically, starting from the beginning, who I am, well, what do I do, etc. I we run a company. It's an application, turnkey applications as well as websites and mobile apps and so on. And as part of that, we are we meet people as we go. They come along with their ideas and their various different visions that they have as to how they want applications to be developed and so on. So in 2015, I met up with a gentleman named Tom Otieno. He's Kenyan. He was part of the UNHCR, and he started discussing a particular vision that he had. From there, we actually sort of got involved, and we've been working on this, but on the base project since then. And we have come to a point where hopefully, I say hopefully, we will actually be launching very, very soon. So the outline of the project, as he discussed with me, why is it that whenever there is a disaster, because he was working with UNHCR, we have seen this thing on the TV. Everybody, all of us have actually sort of gone through this, where there's a disaster, there's a flood, or there is refugees that are actually being managed, displaced people that are being managed by United Nations, HCR. What happens is that they take the lock, stock, barrel, and the kitchen sink with them. In other words, you will see all their vehicles, with the United Nations flag. They will be roaming around, and they will have their own doctors. They will have their own teachers and their own people who actually sort of do the work and everything. And they do not sort of make use of the community that has actually been displaced, because there are people within the community who are already teachers, they're already doctors, there are, and it's not that they are completely destitute or something like that. It's just that there's an event that has happened which has displaced or had an impact on their livelihoods and so on and so forth. So they have actually had to leave and move on into another area. But the UNHCR have got this thing by saying, no, I mean, we are actually going to look after you. So, excuse me, let me just sort of shut the door, because I think my wife is there in the other room trying to, okay, yeah. So, and I said to him, I said, okay, so what have you got in mind? I mean, so basically the idea was that, okay, so what are the, based on the goals that we have, the 17 goals. So we have got the goals of poverty, we've got goals of, sort of food attainable, hunger should actually be eradicated. And then you have things like you have education, you have health, you virtually actually sort of covering all the basic things that people think. I mean, it's not rocket science when we do to actually sort of go through and say, well, everybody should have a livelihood, everybody should have education, everybody should have good health, so that they can actually then, and everybody should have clean water and facilities and everything else like that. So from there, we started looking into all of this, and the focus was that, okay, if you actually sort of look at any charity, the charity is running, I mean, nothing against the charities or anything like that, but just the way that they run. So they will actually go into an area, they will start a project, like, for example, they will say, okay, fine, you know what, we're going to develop agriculture in this area. Fine, they start the agriculture, they actually sort of train the person what to do, they give them the seeds, they give them a piece of land, and they give you all these facilities. And when it actually sort of comes to fruition, now the produce has actually been, is ready for picking and everything. The farmer is asked, or the person is asked, okay, fine, I mean, go away, pick it and take it to the nearest market. And you think, hang on a minute, this person did not have the money to buy the stuff. Now he's actually sort of got the stuff. He's asked to go to a market, which probably is not nearby. It is miles away. He hasn't got any help. So that is why you see these farmers who actually sort of come and stand on roadsides, and they're actually selling it to the cars that are actually passing by. So you think, where is the closure? What is the thought process behind all of this? So the idea that actually sort of came through, we have now developed an application called the Communities, it's called Community Development Management System. So it's an software application. What it does is that it actually puts a kind of a framework around any project that any charity, any large organization like United Nations or the World Bank or the government itself that want to run. So it has got, it actually captures all the, first of all, what it does is there is a disconnect, okay? The disconnect that we have is the government and these organizations, they come in with all the facilities, they come in with the money, they come in with all the manpower, resources, the whole thing is there, but they have got no clue as to where the help is needed. All right, so what happens is that they will actually go in and they will actually then get, ask the local communities and local MPs and or local dignitaries to say, where can we actually sort of do this coffee project, for example. And they are obviously not, because there is a disconnect in who needs the help or who can actually be helped and what help can actually be channeled to them. So what our project does is, the first thing that we do is we actually go and pick up the demographic of that area. Okay, so people go out and they actually sort of take, okay, fine, who are you? What do you do? How many children do they go to school? Do they do, what sort of work do you do today? Have you got any running water? All these kind of things are actually sort of picked up. So these are the things that are on our database. So when an organization comes in and says, okay, we want to help, we say, what project do you want to run? Depending on that, if it's an education, then we will actually pick up the people who are actually lacking education or wanting education help for the children, for themselves, etc. If it's agriculture, it goes on to agriculture. If it's health, it goes on to health, and so on and so forth. So that is what the application does. So from there, we can actually sort of plan out a program to say, okay, fine, these are the people that need the help, the X amount. They will, the program itself will actually sort of indicate that we want to start off this project with, say, 5,000 people or 6,000 people. So out of that, you will actually select these 5,000, 6,000 people and say, okay, fine, let's actually sort of now channel. And then on, what happens is that there is a hierarchy that is actually captured. So you have a program manager, you have the people who are actually going to be managing the whole thing, the people who are going to be delivering these things, what sort of skill sets we require, what sort of resources are required. Now, there are people within the community. So this is community helping itself. This is basically what it is. The community we know from our demographic, when we actually collected all the data, that this particular person has got a truck, or he might have a, he might have a vehicle that can be used when needed. There's somebody else who's actually got a tractor. There is somebody else who's got, a cart or whatever. Depending on that, what then happens is that those people are targeted, and they, and the whole application works basically on giving tasks to people, and the tasks are actually sort of received by the people on their mobile phones. So each person part of that program will be given a mobile phone. There's an app that's running on it. The app actually sort of receives the tasks. For every task that this person does, he actually gets points. And those points are converted into pay. So they will actually get there. And then what happens is that the project itself, when it actually comes to fruition, it's now finished. And the produce is actually picked up by the truck. The person who gets who has the truck will be given the task to say, hey, guy, here you go. You can actually go and pick up this particular produce from X farm and so on. Complete records are actually sort of kept. Which farm picked information? The produce is picked up from the farm gate. It is brought into a pack house in refrigerated trucks. It is then cleaned, packed, and it is ready for export. So it's exported. And our application then, what it does is it actually has got the end game, basically, where we will actually generate. We've got an e-commerce website which will be, or has been, publicized to the importers, in the UK. They will actually then place these orders from them. The people in Uganda, I mean, this particular project is running in Uganda, just sort of, okay, and they will do all the packing and everything, and the produce is actually sold at international prices. It's not, so the burden is not on the person who's producing this thing. So the idea is that if you have actually got 5,000 people, you actually sort of do all this for them. There is going to be an output now. So the tracking of the output is basically the profit that the whole program is actually going to be made. That profit is then channeled back into the community to expand the base. So these 5,000 people, they don't need our help anymore, except that they will be retained on the application. They will be given work. They will be given tasks. It's not that they're just going to be, okay, fine, now away you go, start again. So from there, you will build the next community, and then the next community, and so on. Hopefully, then you will have something that's sustainable.
Yeah.
It actually then rotates. So that's basically what how we are involved personally in the United Nations goals that you have actually mentioned.
Yeah, and as you were, explaining this this concept, I'm thinking about the principle of Sikhi Girt Kamal and
Yes.
being ethical. So, in doing what you're doing, how do you ensure that it's Girt Kamal, that it is ethical, that you are empowering people to help themselves rather than, because some charity can be, there's different forms of charity, and some ways of helping people are more empowering than other ways. So how do you bring Sikhi into this, and to ensure that you're actually doing good rather than being a do-gooder?
Well, at the end of the day, I mean, a long time ago, I think it was in 1991 or something like that, that I actually sort of came across this particular booklet.
Sikhs Helping Sikhs. Okay.
Right. And I was reading it, and I already had these ideas in my mind at that time. That one of the things that our Sikhi does have the tenets that actually sort of arm you for these kind of things. You're brought up, and you always see that there is giving and seva and selfless seva and all that kind of thing. But one thing that I actually sort of always questioned was that, okay, fine, we are actually, the Sikhs as such are out there helping other communities, other people, and so on and so forth. But my view and my experience is that our Sikhs, they need help as well. And that is something that we are completely forgetting. right? And this is actually going to cause an issue as we go forward, because what's happening is that, okay, fine, the life that at the time when I was growing up was different to what it is today. We do not have all this social media. We do not have all these the the kind of data that is actually sort of coming out on your mobile phones. You can actually just sort of pick up anything that happens a second ago, it's on your mobile phone the next second. So the flow of data is very, very fast. What is happening is that we are currently, I think, for all the generations that we have at the moment who are actually working on these kind of things, will be fine. But moving forward, I have a feeling that we will actually lose our youngsters coming out of all this. Now, you asked me about the how do I actually sort of relate it. The whole thing that what I've described has been done completely on pro bono basis. We haven't charged anything for this particular project. And how we actually sort of, once the business starts running, which is basically the produce starts getting sold on our e-commerce website, that's where we probably will actually sort of make some sort of rollback. But it's the principle of the project, and it's the value that is actually going to deliver to the people. That's what we're looking at. So as far as I'm concerned, I think that is what Guruji has already stated, that whatever you do it selflessly. As long as it actually sort of is going to go and help other people, it's actually going to make the livelihoods a little bit more easier, a little bit more comfortable. That's basically what I look at.
So do you do this in the spirit of seva?
Indeed.
Yeah. Okay, wonderful. And you talked about the younger generation. And so I think that maybe one of the reasons we forget that our own community needs help is because materially we're doing well materially, we have our bellies full, and so in terms of the physical needs like food and clothing and shelter, we're as a community, especially those of us living in the West, as a community, we're doing okay. But in terms of good health, like number 3, good health and well-being, I don't think we're doing that well, because chronic diseases, diabetes and high cholesterol and all of these lifestyle choices, the younger generation living on pizzas and I don't know,
Yep.
not exactly, it's not in terms of these chronic illnesses, including depression, like well-being, including depression. How relevant is the concept of Chardi Kala? How much do we imbibe that spirit of gratitude and that everlasting optimism that Chardi Kala?
You see, again, what happens is that this Chardi Kala thing actually sort of gives a false kind of perception to the community, because you're not looking back, you're not looking around you by saying our own people need help. We in early, early 2000s and so on, my wife, she started taking our children to she joined the St. John's ambulance, and she started taking our children who were around about, I think, 6 or 7 years old, or 6 and 8 at that time, and to learn first aid. All right. Eventually, I got rolled in as well, and because I used to go and drop them, and the instructor was my cousin, and he actually sort of said, "Buddy, come on, you're going to get on," and obviously, so once I got dragged into it, and these kind of things actually started coming up. I mean, now what we noticed at that time, or what I noticed at that time, was that it's our elderly that are actually suffering. Our elderly are suffering. Our elderly are not getting the support of their family. Some of them don't even have the means of actually sort of making a meal for themselves, and they are living on their own. Okay, now I ask this of the organizations. I won't name them. We know who, the ones who are actually prominent in the community, as to what are you doing in order to, do you realize that our own, flesh and blood, they are actually going without food. There is and there is no support, and they're relying on social services and so on. And we know how it is. It is very difficult for social services to actually sort of give the support and at the level that people deserve. So there we are. Now, what we have done as part of our St. John Ambulance, I've actually sort of now left them. We used to help out at the Nagar Kirtans and so on in Southall and Hounslow. We actually sort of did it for years. And we have left it, but what we have done is we have actually sort of created a small group called Harrow Sikhs. I live in Harrow, and in Harrow we do not have that much of a community of Sikhs, but we started it, and nevertheless, for the ones that there are here, and we try to do whatever we can in the community from. And now, just as you have actually mentioned, we have actually worked with the Sikh doctors organization when they go into the gurdwaras and so on. So we actually sort of go there from the point of view of actually trying to provide them support for mental health and these kind of issues. Now, the problem that we actually sort of notice is that nobody wants to own up that they've got a problem, because it's the chardi kala aspect of it, that we are, there's nothing wrong with us, kuch nahi hai, I don't want to share anything with anyone. But we have actually seen recently that there have been cases which are tragic cases, where there was, the kind of stigma of mental health or of any other illness and stuff like that.
The thing is that people don't want to admit they're depressed. They'd rather go to the doctor and get some pills for it.
Yeah.
And taking pills for depression is the way out, but that is not really justified, is it?
Indeed. So, and also, I've noticed that, I'm going to be very critical, I'm sorry, I mean, there's no other way, that the organizers of our gurdwaras, they want to, there is no support. I mean, the gurdwaras, I always believe right from the age of very early age, when I was growing up about 13, 14 years, that gurdwaras are the pillars, they're the cornerstones of a community. And everything that actually sort of channels the gurdwaras must be prepared for those kind of things. But if you actually go and talk to the organizers, the general secretaries, the presidents, and so on and so forth, you will always find them sort of saying, we don't want to get involved. Now, it is not their fault altogether, because what happens is it's our community themselves who will say, who are you to come over? And so I don't know, I'm not blaming anyone, but I don't have any because at the end of the day, the person who is actually sort of is suffering is the person who should actually bring it up, and then there will be plenty of people who can actually come and help.
It's just that when somebody is depressed, they're not in a state of mind to be able to articulate.
Absolutely. So it's the people around him that should actually sort of do that, but they actually sort of try to hide it. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be the judge of anything really, but this is what it is in the Sikh community as such. I mean, that's what I have actually sort of. Now, what we are trying to do in Harrow with the Harrow Sikhs is to actually sort of call in experts from our Sikh group, people who actually sort of deal with mental health, who deal with diabetes, and who deal with menopause and all these kind of issues that people actually or communities suffer from, to have a kind of a small gathering and try to give some sort of some information, because having information is more important at the same time as actually sort of looking for a solution.
Absolutely. And you see, culture is based on very strong family and community relationships, and wherever we go, the gurdwaras are a hub, and they enable us to form the communities around the gurdwaras, and but at the moment, people go where their jobs are. And so one of the reasons we're doing so well is that we are willing to travel to where we're willing to leave our families and live away and go to where the jobs are. But there's a cost to that. The cost is the weakening bonds and relationships, and the pandemic kind of illustrated that, didn't it? It's that, so the loneliness that people feel with their children being in Canada or the US, and it's great that they're doing so well, but during times of trouble, it's a plane journey away.
Correct.
So that's the cost of so in terms of sustainability, how do we sustain the relationships? How do we engage in industry, innovation, and infrastructure that is sustainable?
Right. Okay, you've touched on another nerve now. Okay, I mean, basically, it actually, we have to strengthen our local community help groups and stuff like that. This is where the Gurdwara has got to go into the community. You cannot actually just sort of stay within the boundary of the Gurdwara. It's got to go out, and at the same time, our people must allow this kind of help to come into their houses, because without that, it's not going to work. And you got to have bold kind of policies or bold ideas that have actually come up. The first thing to accept and admit is that there is a problem. If you can't admit that there is a problem, oh ji sara kuch theek hai, koi cheez nahi hai, assi ta chardi kala ch rehne, sikh ta sare passe utte rehne, and so on. It just doesn't work, because everybody is in need. I mean, I'll give you a small example. Our youngsters were, when our children were about, when they have to select the subjects for the GCSEs and stuff like that, what happens is that the school allows them to have a week of work experience in various different occupations and so on. Mm-hmm. We noticed that in Harrow, we have got, very, like I said, a small community of Sikhs, but the Gujarati community and the Muslim community, they're quite heavily populated here. Right. We noticed that all the Gujaratis, all the children were actually going into hospitals. They were actually going into, some with some consultant who's working in a hospital. There was somebody who was actually going with the accountants, or somebody who was going with these lawyers who are working, in London and so on and so forth. And we tried everywhere, because our children, my daughter, she wanted to go into dentistry. We tried everywhere, no luck, because, the hospitals, they said, no, you should have applied 6 months ago. Somebody else says, so you should have actually done this, you should have done that. And they were just left on a limb. Now, don't tell me that there aren't any sick doctors and sick dentists who could have actually sort of taken them on. No, they don't have the time. So I had to then, a good friend of mine, bless him, Lalit Patel, I rang him up and I said, hey, Lalit, I've got this issue. He says, yeah, no problem, just send them in. They went there one by one. Okay, they so basically, this is the difference. This is the difference between, I feel, of communities. Now, I have got, another thing that I keep on promoting at Gurdwaras. I say to them, listen, guys, what we need to do is we need to form a kind of a business support groups within the Gurdwara. Oh, no. Yeah, that is not something, you go to different organizations, you actually go to the,
Chamber of Commerce,
Federation of Small Businesses, or you actually go to BNI or something like that to do this. Now, you look at the Gujaratis, right? What do? Once a month, they have a business meeting in the temples, in the Hindu temples, in the halls. Everybody goes there, whoever wants to go there, and they actually sort of communicate and they do business among themselves, right? Where are we? There is nothing. The one thing that my uncles, I did not understand this when I was growing up, they would always say to me, this Punjabi. I'm sure that you're conversant with it. ਆਪਣੇ ਸਿੱਖ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਨੇ ਜਦੋਂ ਪੌੜੀ ਚੜ ਜਾਂਦੇ ਨੇ ਤਾਂ ਪੌੜੀ ਨਾਲ ਖਿੱਚ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਆਪਣੇ.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah?
Right.
But this is basically what is happening, and I actually sort of have had talks with people who have made it. They're millionaires in this country.
Mm-hmm.
And you say to them, listen, guys, I mean, we need help for our smaller businesses. You should actually sort of, give them, oh, yeah, no. I mean, it actually sort of then it just blocks the whole conversation. There is no help. And then they will actually give you examples of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And then you say, well, how do you think that the Jew actually sort of grows? Now, here I must add something that is very interesting. The Sikhs from Afghanistan, they are a completely different mindset. They have a completely different mindset. They are the people who are actually promoting their own community to get into businesses, right? By in a collective way. They have actually sort of collected their resources together. They are now pushing into various different, the corner shops used to, they started off with the Gujaratis initially, and then they went on to the Sri Lankan, and now they're actually going. Every shop in Harrow has actually gone to the Afghani Sikhs, right? And how are they doing it? They're doing it by the community helping each other. They've got a pot and they're using it, and they're saying, okay, fine, don't worry. You go there, you start something, and this is what this book is talking about. This person here, he hasn't given his name because it's selfless.
Seva. He's written the book for Seva, right?
Now, I don't know whether, do you know his story? Do you know the story? No? Okay, I'll give you a very brief story. What it is that Sikh gentleman goes from India to Australia.
That's okay. the author of the Sikh.
The author of the promoter of the person who's created Sikh, helping Sikh.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Oh, it's an organization.
So somebody else actually sort of then writes this and narrates this. So he goes to Australia, and he like everybody, making difficult to make ends meet and so on and so forth. He started working at a cafe, and the owner of the cafe, he actually sort of slowly learned all the ropes and everything, and it came to a point where the owner did not have to do very much, and the owner wanted to retire or something like that. I don't know exactly what the transaction was, but the owner sort of said, listen, I will actually sort of give you this business provided you actually sort of give me X amount of, you pay the loan. I'll loan it to you, and you pay the loan as you go, as you build the business. Okay. And that's it. That's yours. All right. Yeah. So slowly what then started happening, this is the time when there were very few Indians in Australia. Okay. And then the students started going there and so on and so forth. There were other like him coming along. So what he would do is he would actually give them part-time jobs. Okay, fine. I mean, you come along and you help them. And slowly he started realizing, he says, okay, what I'm going to do now is that I'm going to train these people. And he would actually give that particular unit and have this person share in it. Okay. And then go and open up another one, and then open up another one, and open another one, and so on. He actually sort of started doing this, and eventually there was no Gurdwara in Australia at that time. So what he did was now by this time he's actually becoming, he's got lots of shops that are running, and the people are actually sort of working for him. And he came up with this idea of thinking, okay, what I'm going to do is that we need a Gurdwara, but there's no point in having a building that is actually sort of sitting there and not doing anything, basically producing anything for itself. So he came up with this idea. He actually sort of built a purpose-built building. The ground floor was all units, business units, and they built the Gurdwara above it. The business units were like, things like, flower shops and this, something that is actually sort of keep on working. People need that, sort of restaurants and coffee shops and things like that. And it was all to do with that. Now, and then what he did, he put that into the trust. Okay. And that's actually sort of running that. And then when he went to India, to Amritsar, and a person on a rickshaw who was a Sikh chap, he sort of took him from wherever he was to the Gurdwara, and then he asked him, he says, how much do you earn, how much do you do this, and how much does it cost? And he actually sort of worked out that this person, he hires it for somebody, and then he actually sort of runs it, and then he only earns about 30 rupees or something like that a day. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, he said, oh my God, this is my Sikh brother who is actually sort of being exploited by the so on. And he actually sort of then started this slow, this thing over there as well, that he gave this person the amount. He bought him a couple or 3 or 4 rickshaws and such stuff like that. And he says, okay, fine. Now what you do, you actually now start renting them out, and so on and so forth. Nothing very much, but it actually sort of settled this person. This is called sustainability. This is called proper seva. But it's the way that you think. What we think, what Sikhs think, in my view, that I have met up until, I'm not suggesting all of them, but all of them, there is seva. They will actually go into the Gurdwara and they will actually give £1 million over there, but they won't give 10 rupees or 20 rupees or 100 rupees to a person outside. No, they will actually break him down and say, no, yaar, tu the kattakar, and so on. So this is the...
What, in my experience, what I've noticed is that you mentioned the Jewish community and also the Chinese community as well. They help each other out, and that creates a lot of social and cultural capital. And when my parents came to England in Stafford, they helped each other out. There was a community of, there were a few families, and how did they buy their houses? They bought their houses in the way you described. They pooled their resources. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to afford it. So they helped each other out. About 17 families, they helped each other out. They bought a 30 family. By the time there were 30 families, they managed to buy a Gurdwara, a building, an old church building. How one family couldn't have done it on their own. So they pooled their resources for that. But when it comes to business, you see, I come from a farming background. And so those of us who come from a farming background, we are not business minded as such. And so therefore there's that kind of like, oh, but that's business. And we know we encourage each other to become professionals, but it's as though even those who started their businesses, they want their children to be professionals rather than business people, because there seems to be more stability in a profession rather than a business. Like here in Birmingham, where I live now, a lot of our community, they did buy shops, but their children don't want to work in the shops.
Yep.
Or they bought restaurants. The children don't want to work in the restaurants. They want to be professionals, because a business is just a means to an end for a short amount of time.
Yes, it's the way that you look at it. There are, and the other thing also is that the children probably want to modify things. It's the same in the Gujarati community. Gujarati community have got they're exactly at the same. They come to the same point in the sense that the children have educated themselves. They've gone into professional jobs, and they do not want to stand behind the counter. And so I can't really comment on that. I can see that there's progression. The progression is actually going to go on to the next stage, and so on. And at the end of the day, yes, the community has to change their tax and things like that happen. But the main thing is that if you still have to have some sort of framework where we can, as a community, have a kind of a network where we can actually, pull on or fall back on when there is some need of advice, assistance, or things like that. And this is where business networks and social networks and because a social network will actually sort of bring people together, and people will have the time to say, hey, I mean, I've got some problems with my diabetes, and I've got this and that, the other, and that's where, you could find some professional person who's available to say, well, give them advice to say, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do, and so on and so forth. Just a little bit of help helps. But it is a challenge for the community at this stage, because what has happened is, like you say, that we are all well established
Yes.
by
And
God's will.
you see, when I was growing up, I grew up in Stafford, and when my brothers and my sister got married, we didn't hire halls for their weddings. The community came around and we cooked together. We put a tent up in the garden, and there were big kind of cauldrons. We were making food back in, and the whole community kind of pulled together to make all the food and to join in with, but now it's all outsourced. Nobody gathers the community. Even the family members don't go out to help, because it's just all catered. It's all outsourced, isn't it? So again, like there's an advantage. It's like there's the affluence. People spend thousands on weddings now, because they can afford to spend thousands on weddings. But what's the cost of that? The cost of that is that even when I went to my niece's wedding, I stayed in a hotel. In the past, I would never have stayed in a hotel. I would have slept on the floor on my brother's dining, in their living room. You see, that's what.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, personal experience now, because I know exactly what you mean. We've actually been there, done it. In fact, I mean, I remember in the mid 70s and stuff like that, because that's when we came, 75. And we had our cousins and family kind of relations and so on getting married, and going there and setting the tables in the Gurdwara and all that kind of thing, and putting the papers and whatever else and so on. But one thing I noticed, even at that time, I was talking to a friend of mine. I said, listen, I mean, what we should do is provide this service of setting the tables and stuff like that, and charge the person, because what happens is that nobody wants to do it from the family. It's just people like, volunteers like us who come along and put the chairs and set the tables up for the people to have their lunches and their breakfast and whatever else. Yes, but it is sad that we have actually gone into this, because yes, the aunties and the uncles and everybody else, you would actually get around and you would actually be making dal and whatever, sabji and whatever else. There were jokes that were actually going on. People were actually sort of catching up with it. Now all that happens is you go there, you sit, and you hardly meet the family. And you just, like you said, go and stay in a hotel, go there, pay, show a face, and away you go. And like you said, the cost of this, the whole event, is just rocketed. I mean, it's completely out of everybody's budget. My son, he's getting married in February next year, and we're going through the same paces at the moment, and trying to find out. I mean, people are actually sort of charging. Even the toll player is charging £500. They used to do it for free. We used to do. I used to do. I was interested in videography at that time. I did virtually almost all our family. Right, I had a video camera and I had all the kit and everything. I did it for free. Never charged anyone. It was, it was something that you do for family, don't you? But nowadays there aren't any favors, man. I mean,
Yeah, and again, this concept of sharing, like you would borrow somebody's video camera, you would borrow somebody's camera, and so people no longer want to borrow, they want their own. But in terms of sustainability, there's kind of like a growing kind of drive for servitization, so that we don't buy even washing machines, like we might buy the service rather than buying the gadgets ourselves, so do you think that in terms of where we're going, how we're going forward, in terms of Sikhi, is there some way that we can use our values in terms of being ecological, being ethical, and being all of that, in terms of moving forward, not kind of like just going with the flow of like the Western kind of concept of, ever increasing productivity and material wealth? Is there another path that we can divert ourselves on?
I think that is an interesting question. In my view, again, it actually sort of, looking back, we've just been to India now recently, and looking at the attitude of the people and the behavior of the people, there has been no change whatsoever in terms of the ecological or environment type of the push that is actually sort of happening, although the country can do with the environment, cleansing of their environment, and improving their water supplies and water quality of life and so on and so forth. Because again, it is the comfort. It is the suddenly, whereas people used to be hand to mouth, now they are flaunting. They spend more than what I would if I want to buy something. It's just like, oh well, it's only X amount of rupees, and you say, hang on a minute. I mean, this makes about £500.
Yes.
So I think that the improvement of people's wealth, or as they have started getting more and more comfortable, they do not have to think as to where tomorrow's dinner is actually, or food is actually going to come from. There is no consideration in their minds for this kind of thing. And I think the same thing over here. It is, again, because we are very comfortable. We do not have to think. My children, for example, they don't have that concept that I had when I was growing up to say, can I fix this?
Mm. Yeah,
it's just gone, Dad. It's gone. Bang, out. And next day you have Amazon. Oh, so why did you have to do that? We could have fixed this. No, Dad, there's no point in fixing it. So that concept it's basically because of it's being driven by this the increase of wealth in people's pockets and so on and so forth. That's what I feel.
Yeah. And somebody said to me the other day that I was listening to somebody, and he said he was from Nigeria, and he said Nigeria is the blackest country in the world, and it's also the whitest country in the world, and because he was talking about the fact that people want to emulate New York and London, so we're all kind of like driven with this concept of like material wealth is a symbol of success, isn't it?
I don't think that's the same. I mean, if you actually sort of go to India, they're exactly the same. I don't know whether you have actually sort of seen these videos, and a lot of worry that people have is that people are forgetting Punjabi in Punjab.
Yeah, because that's a government drive, isn't it?
That's a government drive, but nevertheless, I mean, we should be sharp enough and we should be astute enough to say, hey, they're actually trying to cheat us out of this. We should have our own means of actually sort of training and teaching Punjabi and what have you. But majority of the people want to speak in English, or Hindi, which is a shame. So over here, it's exactly the same. I mean, at the time when my children were growing up to the age of about 6, they were speaking perfect Punjabi, because we used to live close to mom and dad, and the Punjabi bol this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as they started school, within a few months and so on, they're just speaking English, and slowly now they are in their mid-20s, and it's just basically now they're coming along and saying, Dad, I want to learn Punjabi. They're getting Punjabi classes online and all that. it was there.
Mhm.
And this is, again, I would actually sort of put it, because where did I learn it from? I'm from Kenya.
Mhm.
Okay. In Kenya, everybody used to speak in Punjabi with us. You go to the Gurdwara, they would actually speak Punjabi and so on. Okay. And the other thing that you also we had was that there were a lot of sakya, which is the stories of our gurus and so on and so forth. They would actually sort of narrate them in the Gurdwara. Nowadays, ki hoya hai ki Gurdwara de vich, it is just nobody actually sort of talks about any katha or discussion, or the discussion je hundi bhi hegi hai, it is at such a high level. It's actually sort of trying to interpret the Guru Granth Sahib ji, Guru koi paath da koi le lenge and so on.
Mhm.
But that's not, it's not going to cement the story of Sikhism into you. What I mean, I remember even today, there are certain things that certain Sakhiyan, oh, Guru Nanak Dev Ji itthe gaye, idhar ke hoya, and what have you. I still remember them,
Mhm.
right? And alongside that, I remember the Shabad that was actually sung with them,
Mm.
because you're interested in stories, because stories are the things that actually sort of tell you where why do you want to be part of Sikhi?
Mhm.
It is not ਕਿ ਉੱਥੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਉਹਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਪਾਠ ਦਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ translation ਕਰੋ ਕਿ ਆ ਚੀਜ਼ ਏਦਾਂ ਕਿ ਏਦਾਂ. It does have a little bit of meaning, but it doesn't actually tell you as to what Sikhi is all about. So I don't understand as to who are the people who actually sort of took away the right for people. From what I understand, you're not allowed to actually sort of talk about Sakhis in Gurdwaras anymore,
Mm.
which is a shame,
It is,
because
yeah.
that is another area of because they, if you tell a story to a child, he will get more interested. He will actually sort of get ingrained into it, and he wants to sit in the Gurdwara. No wonder nobody wants to go to the Gurdwara, because all they do is just Shabad padhna agate hote ho, and samajh nahi pendi hai ki they don't go.
Yeah. And some people will say, well, I'd rather just listen to that on YouTube,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, and which is a big shame. And I don't understand as to where our, the kind of leaders of Sikhi are coming from. I understand their perspective as well, in the sense that there were people who were actually making things up, and they because there isn't any written narration or written by the gurus themselves. Okay, ਸਾਰੀਆਂ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਸਾਖੀਆਂ ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਕੋਈ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਵਿਆਖਿਆ ਜਿਹੜੀ ਹੈਗੀ ਹੈ, that is all other people who have actually written it from their perspective ke Guru ji ਏਦਾਂ ਕੇ ਹੋਇਆ ਏਦਾਂ ਕੇ, so I can understand all that, but those are still helpful.
Yeah, because those are the kind of stories that we would hear, around the chulla, when we were
absolutely
we'd hear
exactly,
those
and you still remember them.
Mm.
And you still remember them, because and you actually sort of learn certain principles from those stories as well. And just time that the koi cheez hundi hai, you want to work out right from wrong or anything like that, should I or shouldn't I do it? So I thought it Sakhi, yeah, that thing comes into mind. Guruji ne iddar ke kita siga, no, I shouldn't be doing this or whatever, no, but it's just
that's how we learn ethics, I suppose, isn't
yeah.
it? We learn to discern. But okay, so thank you very much. I'm just conscious that I've got another call
No.
soon, so that's been wonderful. Thank you very much for your time. I've really found that to be quite a very thought-provoking conversation.
Thank you, and the same here. But yeah, all the best.
Okay.
If there is anything, you know where I am. So
okay, great. Thank you very much.
cheers. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye.